another comment that I would like to address, and it's a two-part comment, so I'll read both parts because I interceded there with a question and there was a response following that. This comment was on our Tea Parties and Totalitarianism broadcast, and it reads as follows. Wendy, I think you're being a little unfair blaming the Tea Party for the invalid critiques leveled against libertarianism. People have been using the same ad hominem non sequiturs since long before the Tea Parties, and will continue to do so into the future. I also think it's wrong to claim that the Tea Party has been taken over by a single bloc. True, many wish to do so and may someday succeed, but it's not happened yet. You're setting an impossible standard if you expect unanimity. Now, I asked this individual how he would characterize the present condition of the Tea Party movement, if it's at all possible to make generalizations, and whether he believed that the Sarah Palin/Glenn Beck types were having a difficult time making inroads into the movement, or whether they've been largely successful. And the follow-up comment of this individual was, interestingly enough, Judge Napolitano asked Glenn Beck if he was more Ron Paul or more Sarah Palin, and he said Ron Paul. The conservative nationalist Republicans have always had a following and are certainly a part of the Tea Party movement. However, I see no evidence that they are converting the more libertarian elements. I do, however, see some of the opposite, though how much is hard to estimate, and that libertarian message is getting out as never before, even if Beck has not read Hayek. Well,
just the idea that Beck is more Ron Paul than Sarah Palin is absurd, if you just listen to Beck for a little while. Many of Beck's views center around patriotism, a kind of jingoistic nationalism, and religion, both of which are staples of Sarah Palin's platform, but not of Ron Paul's. Ron Paul happens to be a Christian, and Ron Paul happens to believe X, Y, and Z, but he tries very hard not to make it part of his politics. And I can see Glenn Beck attempting, for political reasons, to distance himself from Sarah Palin when asked a question like that, because many Sarah Palinites claim to really like Ron Paul, though they probably don't really understand a lot of his more liberty-focused statements.
It's interesting. I sometimes find it difficult to figure Glenn Beck out because sometimes he does invite reasonably intelligent and articulate people onto his show. Various academicians with whom I've been familiar have spoken on the Glenn Beck show. It includes Bert Folsom, Yuri Maltsev, I believe Tom Woods spoke there as well, and these are intelligent individuals who have sound reasoning in many of their arguments. I might quibble with a few things here and there from their writings, but having had some personal acquaintance with them, they're certainly not the Joe Sixpack types, and they're not the people who pander to Joe Sixpack.
No, well, Glenn Beck has a veneer of intellectualism that Sarah Palin doesn't, but again, if you watch Glenn Beck for more than 10 minutes and you have anything more than a 12th grade education, you're gonna get the sense that Glenn Beck is not actually as smart as he wants to seem. Either that, or there is a very popular theory that Glenn Beck is a massive troll. And given how much Glenn Beck cries on his programs and really puts on a show, and does things that even I can't believe Glenn Beck would be stupid enough to do, like the whole oligarchy incident. Now there's a letter missing here. And that letter is not C, it turns out. I mean, I think that there's a good chance that Glenn Beck is actually a showman, and he does and says a lot of this to put on a really good show, and makes a huge amount of money doing it, I'm sure, plus all of his books. Though it could be that he's brainwashed himself as much as he's brainwashed many of his followers. So much of his rhetoric is just ad hominem and so inflammatory, and he throws around terms that are really much more accurate applied to his own type of movement, a kind of Christian fascism.
One thing that annoys me is his use of the term progressive as a pejorative, because while there was a progressive movement that was very much the antithesis of freedom, it seems that Glenn Beck is taking that movement at face value, just like many self-proclaimed conservatives take the term liberal at face value and use it as a smear, when it originated as liberal meaning advocating freedom.
Yeah.
Yes. So it seems that when he tosses around progressive without qualifications, he maligns the entire idea of progress, as if progress isn't something that's attainable or desirable.
Well, I think that just illustrates that Glenn Beck is not nearly as much of an intellectual as he sometimes seems to be, and he really is pandering to a kind of lowest common denominator in the Christian theocratic movement. The theoconservatives, you might say. You can see this in many of his statements. Recently, he had on a guest talking about how our laws are based on the book of Leviticus.
Which is absolutely
Our laws
absurd.
are based on the Bible. And it's a completely fallacious argument, of course. And if you look up the scholar, in quotes, scholar, that he invited on, who wrote a book about this, about how all of the founders were in fact evangelical Christians or something like that, and all of our founding documents are rooted in the Bible, and it's ridiculous, but this is exactly the kind of thing that Glenn Beck loves to promote, and it's exactly why I would put him in Sarah Palin's camp and not Ron Paul's. Because Ron Paul would never, ever make religion a part of his platform, because Ron Paul tends to believe that freedom of religion is important, as I would say our founders did.
Yes.
Whereas Sarah Palin and Glenn Beck have often and commonly said that anyone who is not a Christian is dangerous or evil in some way.
Yes. Well, the founding generation was actually pretty much the least religious generation in U.S. history.
Yeah, the least religious generation theretofore, certainly, up to that point.
And thereafter as well. There have been numerous religious resurgences in the U.S. after
The Great
Revolution.
Awakening.
Yes, the Second Great Awakening, the formation of the Bible Belt, really, in the southern states.
Yeah,
and
the Midwest. It's more of a Bible girdle.